Welcome back. We are now heading into our final session for the day on our first day of gridXdays 2022. If you're just joined us, then welcome. If you've been here for a while, I hope you enjoyed the last discussion on the Nordics. So now we're talking about how we can have sustainable solutions for everyone. Half of the German population lives in rented accommodation, which you would have just seen in the graph that we just shared. Austria, Denmark, and France are just below this. This means that it isn't easy for a significant portion of the population to switch to clean energy solutions. In addition to this, the UN had a report that shows that cities consume 78% of the world's energy and produce more than 60% of greenhouse gas emissions. So there is clearly a need to make energy efficiency in urban areas and clean, smart energy more accessible for the entire population. How we can do this, we will be talking now with Selina Groß, who helps organizations in the energy sector develop and launch successful products and strategies. As a passionate UX designer and certified systemic coach, Selina structures her work around customer feedback and the culture of the team she is working with. In collaboration with different utilities and network operators, she has developed products in the fields of smart city, smart meter innovation, and home energy management systems. Selina works at HXI, or HXI, a management consulting firm focused on the energy sector. Selina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Joining her, we also have Ernesto Garnier. Ernesto was a consultant at Busting Consultant Group for 6 years, focusing on digital and energy, distributed and renewable energy. He founded Einhundert Energy in 2017 to support real estate in realizing a carbon neutral building stock. Ernesto, it's a pleasure to have you here with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot.
Great. And finally, we also have Karolina Attspodina. She's passionate about technology, startups, and anything that has to do with entrepreneurship and innovation. She mentors local and international startups on digital growth strategies and new market entries with their tech products. A huge supporter of sustainable green innovation that helps us fight climate change and pollution. She's the CEO and co-founder of We Do Solar. Smart solar site protection for your balcony saves 25% on your electricity bills and reduces up to 600 kilos of CO2 annually. Self-installable and lightweight while working from a simple power plug. Karolina, welcome.
How are you? How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
I'm good, thanks. Pleasure to have you all here. Okay, so let's dive straight into the questions. Selina, what are some of the major challenges you see in implementing smart and sustainable cities across the board and ensuring that all parts of society can become prosumers?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, when we think about energy transition in cities, we have to think about the context and the situation we have. So we have 75% of Germans living in urban areas, and more than half of the Germans live in rent. That's a lot compared to other European countries. And that means that a large part of our society is dependent on private landlords or real estate firms, housing firms, which have to implement for them green tech solutions. And why should they do this? Well, first of all, when they would do it if they are forced by law or if they see a positive business case. And so I think the challenge or also the chance is to design business models and services for those stakeholders, which help them to understand, first of all, the market, to implement and to manage those issues. And yeah, as a product person, I always say you have to relieve the pain points from these landlords and housing firms, and pain points can be how to handle issues around the attribution of benefits and costs, how to manage the billing process, how to handle the whole process about asset management and smart metering, for example. And I think the problem is that the legal framework for a positive business case was not really given, or it was not very supportive, I'd say, for these Mieterstrom or multi-tenant self-consumption models in the last years. But I think the law changed last year, so it might be a bit better. Perhaps Ernesto can tell us about this later. So yeah, that would be one point. Good business models, good services, and I think another challenge are the technical standards, but also building requirements, which slow down the process, or especially for older buildings and existing buildings, make the situation a bit difficult. You need smart meters because the energy flows between the different parties must be built accordingly. So once you touch electrics or old measurement concepts, meter concepts in houses, you have to give them a whole update, and that makes business models in this context quite expensive or more difficult to be positive. And yeah, everybody of us knows the situation about smart meter rollout in Germany. We don't have a lot of smart meters in Germany in the field, and even if you have them in the field, you have problems like that you don't have enough mobile network in the basement to operate the smart meter gateway, or you can't connect enough meters to one gateway, and so that makes the situation not really easier for landlords or for real estate companies. So I'd say to sum up, the leeway to come up with innovative new business models will be quite significantly influenced by regulatory background, if the laws are even better in the future, and the strictness of technical standards.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Selina. Something you mentioned there, actually, I want to try and get to the meaty stuff straight away. Benedict, one of the panelists from our previous talks, actually mentioned the Mieterstrom, and actually mentioned you, Ernesto, and said that, it's basically an uphill battle. It's a really challenging task trying to change that in Germany. What would you say to that? What's your view on that?
Well, first of all, hi, everybody. Thanks a lot. It is definitely challenging, because if you look at just the basic idea of rolling out solar PV systems, smart metering, e-mobility, heat pumps into buildings, it is already quite challenging and difficult in the single family house business, where you have great companies like Sunrun in the US or Enpal, 1,5 and all these companies. It's already difficult there because you have planning processes, you need the hardware, you need the processes, you need the IT. So you have a lot of different components, which is very different from a pure software as a service model. On top of that, you have, of course, the regulation. If you now take that to multi-tenant buildings or even multi-owner buildings, it becomes exponentially more complex, because you have many different users in the same building who somehow need to use the same energy source, the solar system on the roof that they share. And of course, the regulation is also more complex. But most importantly, I would actually say you have what in economics many people call like a principal agent problem, right? You have the owners of the buildings, or in new buildings, you have developers who want to operate or build new projects and make a profit. And the people that live there are actually the users that would benefit from solar energy or heat pumps and such. And so you kind of have to find a way to dissolve that problem, as Selina said, by making it attractive and appealing for the owners and developers of those buildings to roll out the technology that will ultimately be used by the inhabitants. And by the way, that can also be companies. It's not only for private households, it's also for office buildings, for instance, quite relevant. And so you have one more party to kind of satisfy, to include into the business case, and you have more regulatory complexity. At the same time, I think it's a truly disruptive time that we're facing now. And the major change to when we started 5 years ago is that now, with the explosion of gas prices, with the surge of all these costs, it becomes a true problem for real estate companies, for building owners, for building developers, to actually be able to offer a housing situation that is affordable to the tenants, to make sure that they get their rent payments, to make sure that they get occupation. And so now all of a sudden it becomes a true competitive advantage to have affordable energy in the buildings. And that is kind of what we see now, a momentum shift. Of course, we would love easier regulation, but at the end of the day, it's all about demand and willingness to pay for that. And we have that right now, and that's different from the past.
But is it a true advantage straight away, or does it come over time? And do we need to educate people that it might take a little bit of time?
It's both. So before this gas price surge, a solar installation on a multi-tenant building essentially only benefited the tenants, right? Because the tenants, they could decide to get that solar energy. So we would install the systems on those buildings, and then they could decide to use it. It's cheaper, it's clean. And the landlord didn't really have a true selfish interest in that. He could get a few euros off of that, but it's not a lot. Now you have the difference that all these real estate companies all of a sudden have to switch their heating concepts in the buildings from gas and oil heating to heat pumps that need electricity. And that is a reality, that's a fact. You won't find any landlord on a commercial professional scale that will still install new heating systems when the system has to be replaced that are using gas or oil. And so now all of a sudden they need a heat pump, and that heat pump needs a lot of electricity. And then they have a direct benefit from having cheap solar from the roof. And that is the game changer of 2022, that you have now what we always call sector coupling, electrification. That is happening as we speak. And it wasn't the case in that segment before. And that is what drives the adoption and makes it interesting and crucial and critical for real estate companies.
Mm-hmm. And Karolina, how do you think we can encourage an inclusive and widespread adoption of sustainable solutions?
Thanks. To be honest, like this is why I started with Use Solar, right? Because I think most of the projects, yeah, they are very big projects, and I think what Ernesto is doing is really important. And obviously, you know, the meters have to be changed, and more solar needs to be on the rooftops of, you know, the tenant buildings. What I, however, saw is that it's still going to take some time until, you know, the landlords are really, or like the owners of the developers of these buildings are really actually going to implement these solutions, simply because it's a very old school and conservative industry that doesn't really want to change much. This is at least what I saw, you know, when I was even pitching, you know, my project and what this can bring to the tenants, and what kind of benefit the tenants would have. However, actually not many developer companies wanted to listen about it, because as Ernesto said, you know, they want to make money out of it instead of just doing good. So this is kind of a big problem, at least what I saw. You know, well, when starting We Do Solar, I think for us it was very important to make sure that we can actually give the opportunity to people to decide for themselves, right? Do they want to do solar, and do they want to obviously not reduce completely their electricity bill by 100%, but at least to reduce it by a certain percentage if they have a balcony. But obviously, you know, we're working on other solutions for them to potentially implement into their households, especially for the renters. So if you're a renter, and as Selina said, you know, like 70% of our people in Germany are living in urban areas. So this is quite a big problem. And this is also where most of the CO2 is actually emitted. And this is where most of the CO2 we have to be actually putting down or like reducing. So I think, you know, being able to produce your own energy is crucial. I think the conflict between Russia and Ukraine this year has really struck everyone and showed that, you know, we need to be really, really fast in terms of introducing renewable energy. It's definitely going to move the needle much faster than, you know, people in the energy industry were pushing it, you know, to be. And I'm sure, Ernesto, you know, since you started your company in 2017, I'm pretty sure that you have had much more progress in 2022 since the whole conflict started. Yeah. So unfortunately, there has to be some kind of, if I'm allowed to say that, some kind of fuck up, you know, in our system in order for everybody to kind of wake up and make sure that they actually understand what is happening and what needs to be implemented. So for We Do Solar, I mean, we focus on, smart solar solutions for your households, specifically for apartments. And for me, it's important that people can take their own decision, not necessarily whether they have a landlord or they don't. And this is why, our systems are solar site protection for their balcony, and they're not, these heavy systems that I do still see on the market that are labeled as balcony solar. However, they're really not. They're just resold from normal rooftop solar, and labeled as balcony solar. But actually, from one side, it's completely illegal. And also, it's very dangerous if you put such a system on your balcony. So we have redesigned completely how balcony solar should be viewed and how the experience of the customer should be in terms of having access to live data, understanding what production they're actually having on their balcony, and also, knowing what kind of impact they're actually holding on to from their home. Yeah. So I think, kind of like local production will be crucial, and we will see more and more of it. I'm pretty sure there will be other products that will be coming out very soon, definitely next year, just from what we saw, happening in 22. And I do truly hope that there will be more solutions for people to implement into their apartments, not just what we're offering.
Thanks, Karolina. And Ernesto, can you confirm that if 2022 has been one of your most successful, or if you've made the most progress this year?
Yes, I mean, let's first say that this war and the suffering of the people is really tragic. So myself and also our team throughout most of the year have not been so happy because of the overall circumstances. So I think that's the overall backdrop. It is true, as Karolina said, unfortunately, the long-term problem of climate change and that drives a few people, but most people are more motivated by short-term momentum and short-term pressure. That is now the case with these costs. I mean, you have to imagine. I got my letter now as a tenant 3 days ago that the gas price for the heating in the house goes from, I think, 4.5 cents to 21 cents. And if you imagine what that means to many people who have a hard time affording the rent anyways, that is something that real estate companies take extremely seriously, because they know that ultimately they have to pre-finance the heating and have to get the money back from their tenants, and they might not be able to get that back. So it takes those pressures. And indeed, I mean, we have about, I think, 3,000 buildings in the total pipeline right now. There's a boom in requests, and there's a bigger willingness to not only work in pilots, but work in portfolios, which is really important to have scale effects. So it used to be a lot of let's test it here and there, and it's much more, okay, how many buildings can we equip right away? And so the challenge is now shifting much more from demand to supply, and having enough hardware, having enough installation to really meet the demand. So yeah, it is a surge. There's still a lot of uncertainty in the market, but it is a surge. Sad that it had to happen this way.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a question from the audience directed to Karolina. Can your products help combat energy shortage in Ukraine by spring 2023?
Yes, actually, we had quite a lot of people inquiring about that, and also by potentially, creating larger orders to supply to Ukraine. We're definitely working on it, and what I can tell you right now, without revealing too much, is definitely we'll be supplying our product to Ukraine and to the housing units that need it. Yeah.
Great news. Now we've talked a lot about, Karolina, you talked about empowering prosumers. Ernesto, you talked about the responsibility of the landlord. Who really has the responsibility for these solutions, and particularly when it comes to apartment buildings? Maybe Selina, do you want to add your perspective on that?
Yes, sure. For me, the biggest question for apartment buildings, who has the responsibility for smaller apartment buildings. So I think. Oh, sorry. I just had a technical issue here. Okay, with the smaller apartment buildings, because private landlords will think a lot about those solutions. They are quite complicated for them, and in the most cases, it's just not very, perhaps not a positive business case for them. I don't know, perhaps Ernesto can tell us more about it. So I think the number of apartment buildings which are owned by private landlords is quite big, and to be honest, I don't know really who has the responsibility, because of course they want to own money with their apartments, but on the other side, the tenants want to have a green energy too. So how do you come along with this problem, Ernesto? Do you also help those smaller apartment buildings to get your solution, or to get multi-tenant solutions?
Let me jump in there. I think it's a big issue. If we segment the market, we look at three types of multi-tenant or multi-owner buildings. You have those that are owned by larger real estate companies. The most famous ones in Germany, like Vonovia, and all the way down to the cooperatives. And to be honest, we only serve companies that own at least 1,000 apartments. So we are really focused on the B2B market, working with customers who have reasonable or big property portfolios so that we can scale our solution. And this is about 30-40% of the tenant market in Germany. And you're right. The other part, the other 60-70% is owned by people who either own one house or maybe just one apartment in a house. And that is an extremely difficult market because you have almost the same customer acquisition cost, the same effort to explain it, sometimes even more, but then you just have one building. So, the business case versus the acquisition effort is just not working. And I fear that in that type of segment, so the smaller landlords and the multi-owner buildings, I think for many of them, the solution of Karolina can be a solution. On the other hand, I think it has to happen with legal pressure. It has to become more of a compliance issue. So we have in many states in Germany now, a mandatory solar, at least for new buildings and retrofits. So that will be the only way really to get to that potential. And I think this is also worthwhile to look at other countries in Europe, because you have countries like Spain and France, where you also have about 30% tenants, but you have a lot of multi-owner buildings. And there, indeed, regulatory simplification is what is beginning to help. I mean, you have almost no solar on these buildings right now, but in Spain, you see a bit of momentum. Companies like Ola Luz who are starting to roll this out because the regulation has made it much more attractive.
Thanks, Ernesto. And Karolina, is bureaucracy killing innovation? Big question. And how can regulation catch up to innovation and enable all parts of society to switch to clean energy?
Yeah, I think definitely there is some bureaucratical stuff that I'm sure a lot of companies in this segment don't really like to have, or would prefer not to have. And especially on the customer side, we're trying to take care of the bureaucratical stuff for our customers as much as we can. Obviously, it's still quite hard to do it for all the European countries. And by the way, we're actually rolling out our product to all European countries from Monday the 14th. So whoever wants our product, please, you're now allowed and can buy it from any country, not just Germany. But yeah, definitely there are some bureaucratical stuff, not as much as I thought there would be, but I can understand that, for setups like Ernesto has, I'm sure there is quite a lot of things that they need to deal with. And I do wish that, the government did work with let's say, innovative companies to make sure that we can implement these solutions rather than slow them down. And this is one of these moments when we really need governmental help to make sure that we can actually, accommodate not only the people that are looking for cleaner solutions or like greener energy, but also to accommodate as well businesses. And like Ernesto said, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that are kind of on the ways. And I think Selina also mentioned, there's some things that are kind of gray zone in terms of like what kind of plugs are used and how the system is connected potentially. So I think there's very easy ways to actually use solar, and it's I'm not really sure why it hasn't been done so far, right? So obviously there's not so many products that are self kind of install and self-use, but I think there should be. So yeah, definitely government help would be needed, and hopefully not just on country level or maybe by state level, but rather maybe EU level, which will help us quite a lot instead of, kind of trying to juggle all different regulations and actually being able to sell to wider and broader markets.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about, go for it.
I think that the problem is also that we have such a lot of different players in Germany in the energy market, and especially with those complex business models or energy systems like we have in cities. It would help if, for example, metering operators would come together with companies like Einhundert, or also with companies who offer dynamic pricing or whatever. But because I often have the impression that everybody is in his own bubble, and they don't, like, for example, the metering operators I work with, they try to do everything what is in law, because that's their job, that they don't really see the problems you have to implement your business model. And so we have events like the gridXdays today, which help already, that we have more knowledge over the different players. But I think to kill this bureaucracy, it would help to have more exchange between the different parties. I don't know how much contact you have to the different DSOs, whatever, when you work on your business models, Karolina and Ernesto, but I can imagine that it might be sometimes hard also to get informations or to work together.
I'm a huge fan of collaboration rather than competition. I also believe that the market is large enough and there is so much that needs to be done that actually everyone that is on the market, will have their own piece. For me, with Ernesto, we're not like in competition in any way at all. He supplies a very different product and service rather than we do solar. So it would make sense definitely to collaborate and actually rather to, push certain even governmental things that we see can help both of our businesses to strive, and obviously of course to kind of refer leads to each other, because as you mentioned, customer acquisition costs can be quite high because it is still a market where we have to educate people a lot about what we're doing and how it works, and what they need to do from their side. And as we know, not many want to do much from their side, so it has to be very simple. And I think there we can also win quite a lot, on the lead exchange, whether they need meter strom, or maybe they need a solution like we have, or anything else.
Absolutely. And also to jump onto the point of Selina and regulation, if you look at our process, the biggest challenge by far is to register the solar systems and the smart meters that we install in those buildings with the local grid operators. And you have about 900 of those in Germany. They have all slightly different processes and rulings, and typically not the most digital interfaces. So it would, of course, one would think you can just from your software shoot a registration for a new system and you get a confirmation back, and that is a big challenge where I think we really have to come together on a broader level, and also as startups, as clean techs, to make sure that we become part of the legal discussions, the top level discussions. It's not yet happening sufficiently because I think there's awareness for the issues, but sometimes the solutions give me the feeling, when I look at the new laws, that give me the feeling that maybe there's still not enough knowledge where the legal texts are actually being drafted, because you could unleash a lot of scaling, a lot of potential in those markets without any extra costs or subsidies. It just takes simplification, and I think that's what actually everybody wants. But then at the same time, the legal results are not always that. And so definitely grid operators interfaces, that is a big challenge, where we try to really communicate heavily. In some areas, we have now had breakthroughs in close interaction with the grid operators, that they would allow for a more digital virtual metering approach that saves us a lot of investment costs. So yeah, I'm hopeful, but it takes time. And yeah, and anything that helps to speed up this process would be very important. Yeah.
I'm interested in what you just mentioned, Ernesto, about the challenges of climate tech startups. Do they have a responsibility then to understand the legal frameworks within their work that they're working within, or do legal entities, should they take climate tech more seriously and adapt more quickly, or does it go both ways?
Well, I do believe that clean techs understand the legal context very well. I mean, you have to operate in such a complex structure with a number of different laws. I think the EU framework is actually really good, but then when it comes to the translation and implementation in the national laws, the quality is very different from country to country. And in Germany, it's extremely complex, and a lot of unnecessary hurdles are in there. And so I think it's about especially resources to make yourself heard in the political process, and also to make sure that the interests of the new economy are part of the legal process, just like the interests of the old economy, right? And so that is, at the end of the day, I think it's what's called lobbying, what is maybe not the most popular term, but it is what impacts laws a lot. And clean techs have much less impact than established companies in that process. And so it doesn't mean that the interests are necessarily different, but there are nuances, and maybe the knowledge isn't there. And yeah, we have a responsibility within the resources that we have for that, to make sure we invest in educating the policymakers in what is needed, because I think the will is there. It's my impression. The knowledge is not always there on what it takes, and it's really about details in laws. Sometimes you just have to change a sentence a little bit, and all of a sudden it reduces the cost of your implementation process a lot.
Karolina, what's your experience with this sort of thing?
I mean, to be honest, I think we already kind of said quite a lot about it, and I think Ernesto already kind of mentioned most of the things. I just wish for more collaboration and more push on the legal side. We're definitely not heard enough, and I think like a couple of months ago, had actually a meeting with let's say a governmental structure in Berlin, which will be promoting solar from next year very heavily. And one of the things that, of course, with my type of product, it's a bit kind of sad to see that, there's a lot of education that needs to be done, because initially what we think about is like solar on the rooftops or solar in like, landfills. And this is all they were kind of talking about, right? Without potentially even thinking about other solutions that can be integrated onto the facades and other ways of actually using solar in that sense. So, there is a lot of education that still needs to be done. I guess, from our side, so the legal side can understand what can be even in there, because at the moment, a lot of them still don't really imagine what is possible in renewable energy, and, how they can make it potentially easier for us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
I have one question to Karolina. I have a friend who has also a balcony solar panels, and he's very happy with it. He's a very technical driven person, and we talk about a lot of education for in the legal context. But how do you educate your customers yourself? Do they come? Do they visit your website and they are already quite educated, or is there a process how you educate customers?
Yeah, I mean, there has to be definitely way more done for sure. So we have customers that are coming to our website. Actually, quite a lot of traffic is coming to our website these days. And mainly they talk to our customer service. So we have a customer service agent basically live pretty much 24/7, which is answering all of their questions. Since our solution is quite easy to handle and is made for non-tech savvy users, it is understandable what we're trying to do, what we're trying to sell, but I do think that because it's such a, let's say, new still product to the market, not everyone understands that they can do it by themselves, or like how light, our panels are. So I definitely see that I'll be working way more with video content to make sure that we, bring the message across to show, how the product works and, how lightweight it is and how easily you can install it by yourself. But there's definitely a lot of questions about like, can I do it by myself? Is it really that I just fix them on my balcony and plug it into the socket and that's all I need to do, so that's kind of the questions that we get. But of course, we're trying to also give more education on our website and to give like calculation estimations in terms of like, we have a calculator online, which, we put in like your zip code and you can, calculate depending on like where your balcony is based, like which direction it's actually facing, how much you would be potentially saving. We also have like a self-test online where you can actually go through the steps to see, okay, what type of balcony do you have? How big is your balcony, or how long is your balcony, or what type of balcony? And they will be able to actually see how many potential panels they'll be able to fit on there and whether our product is even a fit for them or not, right? So we also don't want to waste their time or money if our product is not a fit for them.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks, Karolina. Switching the topic a little bit, Ernesto, can you tell us a bit about the most important factors for energy efficiency in buildings, particularly considering the urgency with which we need to decarbonize urban areas?
Yeah, sure. I mean, let's take an average multi-tenant building. Let's say you have 10 apartments in there. It's an existing building, like most buildings. They're not new. They've been around for 20, 30 years, or even from the 50s and 60s. That building will use about, let's say, 120,000 kilowatt hours of heating energy per year, and then maybe another 30,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. So from that, you can already see that quite a big share is actually about 80% is probably typically coming from the heating side. And so if we talk about energy efficiency, we always have to think about solar PV, but we also have to think about the heating, right? Because if that comes from gas and oil, the electric side, having that with solar and green energy is nice, but you still haven't reached the full effect. And what we can then do as a landlord or as any other party in such buildings is, the first thing is bring in transparency on the energy consumption. So just real-time metering, monitoring of the heat systems. Just from that, we see that you have reduction of 10% or more in the energy consumption buildings, just by people understanding what is my consumption, and also by data showing us how to optimize the heating system. And then the second thing that I believe any landlord or project developer should do is make sure you roll out solar wherever it's possible, because it's fast, it's possible, and it decarbonizes the electric side immediately. And I think that should be any real estate company's mission, and also almost I'm not going to say obligation, but a key goal to make sure you have solar wherever it makes economic sense, because we need energy wherever we can produce it. And then the third step is really to connect the solar system and the green electricity that you generate then in those buildings, to connect that with the heating systems, and to connect that also with e-mobility, so that you can also replace a gas and oil heating with a heat pump, or you even install charging stations wherever you have parkings, so that you can also help your tenants get away from fossil fuel cars. So I think that is kind of the step changes. Metering in real time, transparency and optimization, then you get to solar PV, and then you get to the connection of solar PV and with heating and with mobility. And this is, in my opinion, the playbook and the tool set that any project developer and real estate company has to develop. Most of them already know this for themselves, have defined this, and are in a transition period, finding the right partners and the right setup to actually implement it. Some are a bit earlier and still have to kind of find their ways. But I'm completely convinced that this is the future of the building stock. And that's not only Germany, it's a European phenomenon. And you have actually other markets where you have a much higher share already of heat pumps and solar systems, but especially heat pumps than in Germany.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned there kind of towards the end of the time scale comes mobility as well. And it's obviously very important to integrate e-mobility into buildings and grids and have it all work kind of holistically. Selina, can you provide any insights on how we can ensure that e-mobility is also available to everyone, not just those who can afford new cars?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, perhaps first, let's look at the prices of EVs. Yeah, the technology is quite advanced. So in the last years, the prices were dropping, except of this year, where we had, due to higher procurement costs of semiconductors, raw materials, etc., higher prices. I think I looked up how the prices rose this year. I think it was around about 15%. So having that in mind, I find it quite annoying that car producers still produce very big cars, big electric cars, SUVs, sports cars, prestige cars. And so this creates a rebound effect so that neither our climate benefits from the reduced emissions, nor do low-income groups benefit from lower prices for smaller cars. So I think, first of all, it would be cool to have more cars like the Renault Zoe or the eSmart, and then perhaps lower income groups could also afford EVs. I think another challenge to tackle is the topic of EV charging, as currently there's a high percentage of home charging, I think 80% or something. So for those people who have own garage or our own home, that's okay, but the question is how you charge your EV conveniently and economically when you don't have a garage or your own home. And yeah, one way is of course a more consistent expansion of destination parking or destination charging, and that means charging at places where people spend their time, at the workplace, or at the supermarket. But perhaps also in the future, we have more models like a charging Airbnb or something. At the moment, I think that's not a big issue in Germany because we have enough charging points for the EVs we have. But perhaps when we have even more EVs, that might be business models that come also to Germany. We have them already in the UK. If you look at startups like ZapMap or CoCharger. Yeah, and then one important point I think is how we reach cheaper prices. So how do we charge? And I think therefore we have to work on the intelligence of charging. That means all the models around vehicle to grid. Like in a future scenario, hopefully people can benefit from lower prices when they or they even gain money when they provide their EV to the grid, and or when they just charge slower. Yeah, but as you said, does everybody yeah, how can we access EVs when you perhaps can't afford EVs? I think the question we should also ask in general is, does everyone really need a car going forward? So we saw, for example, that with the rise of car sharing, we didn't have, we still have the same number of cars. I think it's 1.1 per household. And so that what car sharing was not a replacement of cars, it was an additional service for us. And I think that's the problem we have to tackle. And yeah, so I think we have to rethink mobility more radically. And one very radical approach was perhaps already the €9 ticket, or now then 49 ticket. And perhaps we could add sharing options, or perhaps a commuter platform for people who have to ride home from a station or something to this 49 Euro ticket so that we have more intermodal transportation systems. And perhaps also the easiest way, what I, as a person who goes a lot with a bike for work, in Munich the last years, we had a lot more bike lanes and also more secure bike lanes, like the red lanes. And I think that already helps a lot to have more micro-mobility, to have more e-cargo bikes. I mean, e-cargo bikes are so popular for families in cities. And these are all good alternatives to the car, even if it's electric, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Selina. I think you brought up a really interesting point that we probably don't talk about very much, is that, you know, people getting bigger cars, people are maybe buying cars that they don't necessarily need. And on top of these clean tech solutions, we also just need to think about if we can reduce demand and really only living within our means and kind of only using what we absolutely need to. And obviously energy efficiency plays a big role in that, but also kind of educating people of turning things off when they're not using it and things like that. Do you have any kind of insights into that? Maybe Ernesto?
Absolutely. First of all, I completely agree. I mean, it's maybe not the most techy or sexy solution, but at the end of the day, it's also, to some degree, it will be about simplifying your means and also taking a step back. And you mentioned the e-cargo bike. It's what we use here with our kids as well. And so I think car usage will have to go down. And at the same time, car mobility will be there in Germany, but also in markets that maybe in the future want it even more. So e-mobility is important. I think it should be available. Charging should be available where there's stationary parking. Efficiency, I mean, for instance, we have a service where whenever we put solar on buildings, we also implement smart metering, and the tenants in the buildings get an app that they can use where they can see their electricity consumption real time. We actually also put them into a monthly billing logic so that they pay every month what they've consumed in that month, instead of, you know, just paying at the end of the year. And so we do see that transparency is extremely valued. And whenever we make customer surveys on that, we also see that actually it's that transparency that they appreciate even more than having solar electricity from the roof. And so I'm a complete believer in all science shows that you have demand reductions just from transparency. So when you give people the insight into what they consume, on a frequent basis, they will adapt, and certainly with the cost that we have now. And so, for instance, we have a very simple system. It's like a traffic light. We show you what your average bill is, and then we give you a traffic light. It's red when you're on the verge of, you know, exceeding your average bill, and green when you're on the verge of actually achieving a saving. And so that is really appreciated by end users, and I think that should be a standard service on energy. Unfortunately, it's not yet, but we do see that customers appreciate it whenever they can get to experience that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Karolina, have you found anything of that with, you know, people having a better idea of what they're using their energy on? Does it change their habits?
Actually, like I was hoping that car sharing will reduce actually the cars that people are buying, because it did for me. You know, since car sharing started, I got rid of my car and I use only car sharing. So I hope that with maybe spread of car sharing, I think Germany has a lot of car sharing providers as well compared to other countries. You know, actually you don't really see so many car sharing companies. I do hope that people will still realize, and again, it's like more about like kind of changing the mindset of how we consume, right? I think the very old school mindset is that you have to have everything of your own. You have to have an apartment, you have to have a car, you have to have just, this is, you know, this kind of feeling that you're secured. It's not really the feeling anymore. And I think it's about, again, you know, the mindset change. In terms of what I've seen, I really love, we actually get pictures from some of our customers that they're charging their e-bikes on the balcony while our solar system is on. So this is really cool to see. And I hope, you know, more are actually going to be using it this way. And we're definitely going to be including it in more, you know, outreach to our new customers, or showing, you know, the showcases, how others are using it. So I think it's important to kind of, educate and show. But I do see that definitely, you know, for e-charging for cars, there is a lot of locations, yes, but I think there definitely could be more, you know, especially in the garages, in the kind of urban areas, in the buildings. It's still more or less, you know, kind of outside on the street, but in the garages, it's not really available so far, unless like you really have your spot and it's like your own apartment and you're allowed to put that in there. But if you're a renter, you don't really have a say in this. So I hope that, you know, even as a renter, you are able to, you know, ask your landlord or ask the owner to actually provide such a service, and maybe even have, you know, a subsidy that can cover, you know, the facilitation of the e-charging in the garages. Yeah. So, but yeah, on our side, it's usually e-bikes.
Yeah, which is another great solution to complement that. But when you were talking about real estate, Ernesto, have you noticed that, is that more on real estate managers' radars to include more EV chargers in buildings?
Definitely. I think it has taken a little step back compared to the topic of electric heating because of the circumstances of this year. It really depends here if we talk about new buildings and also a bit the building segment. So if we talk about medium and also higher income rental buildings, new developments, EV charging is a must, also for the project developers. So whenever we work with project developers, EV charging is part of the solution. For instance, now in Düsseldorf, we do a huge new district, I think about 500 apartments. I think there's almost also 500 charging stations there. If I'm not wrong, it's immense. So still, often you have the logic or even the requirement to provide us parking for every apartment, and then they automatically think EV. If you look at the medium to lower income rental buildings, very typically you don't even have a parking possibility in the situation, and so it's much less of a topic there. So I think you really have to look at which segment you talk about. Even though I believe that especially in the medium to low income buildings, experimenting with possibilities to have a sharing opportunity or an e-biking opportunity could be a huge benefit. But that's not the case yet. So right now it's more of a premium market topic, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting point of view there. So we only have about 7 minutes left. I would like to kind of ask each of you, looking to the future, what would you want to see happen, whether it be regulatory, some form of innovation, system change? What it would be a one kind of thing that you would hope for to enable these sustainable solutions for all? Starting with Selina. Oh, I think you're muted. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for me, I think all the issues around how smart grid can affect prices. So that would be development which I'd like to. I think it can be very, very cool when the consumer sees, okay, I get cheaper prices when there's a lot of energy in the grid, and then I think the energy transition is much more tangible for everybody and more respected. So I hope that all the issues around vehicle to grid, but also dynamic pricing, which also are related to, for example, smart metering, that these issues will be pushed forward in the next months or years. I think that's an issue which is that we can't feel enough pain at the moment for this. That's perhaps that's next level, but I think we have to, we also have to be quicker in those develop or evolutions to get the people in Germany more more can I say that they accept more energy transitions and that they can see the advantages of it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Karolina, what would you say?
I think it's not just Germany, it's everywhere, right? It's not just just Germany that is kind of like suffering. I think everyone can feel what's happening at the moment in Europe, but I have been getting quite a lot of actually requests from other continents as well, because they do care about their transition, and they do see that this could be actually a huge move forward if we do switch to 100% renewables, and it's definitely possible. I really hope that the adoption of not just solar, but like really different renewable energy sources will be much faster, and there will be solutions that will make it possible for individuals to simply participate without waiting for the governmental kind of help or implementation. Because as we know, unfortunately, governments are moving quite slow. So I think individual participation and being ready, to implement such solutions is the key.
Great answer. Thanks, Karolina. And Ernesto.
Thanks a lot. I'm not going to just blame it on policy. So I would argue that I hope that the understanding that this energy transition can be at the center of our future economic and also household wealth, rather than be opposite to that understanding is a shared vision across European politicians, business people, and private households, so that we get on this joint level of saying, if we have smart metering and insights into our energy, if we have access to solar energy across Europe, that can really help us have affordable energy for businesses and for households, and that can really be the centerpiece of how we do business and how our economies prosper in the future. And if we all have that joint understanding, it will make policy, election choices, and also consumer choices much more consistent and much more future looking. So that would be my hope.
Great. Thank you so much, Ernesto. And thank you to all three of you for taking part this afternoon for our final discussion of the day. Some super interesting topics there, and very important ones that I think don't always get dealt with. So innovative solutions are on the rise, and I think, it's made me a little bit more hopeful. But thanks again for discussing and answering some of the hard questions.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. So that brings us to the end of day 1 of gridXdays, but never fear, we have 2 more days of very exciting topics to cover. So tomorrow we'll be back at 1 p.m. So we'll be here from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. with 5 different panel discussions. We'll be kicking off at 1 p.m. talking about a sustainable ramp up in DERs, from production to destruction. So make sure you tune in tomorrow from 1. We're very excited to have you back here virtually in the studio. And we'll see you then. Thank you so much for joining us.